Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Mr. Cole. This is an optional review, so this will be for the World War I and World War II test. This is going to be the World War I review, so I'm going to kind of jump around quickly from slide to slide. Not going to do the full-on version of everything, but here we go. So we're going to start with World War I with one of the main causes of World War I. We use the word main because it forms an acronym, M-A-I-N. There's four major long-term causes that help cause World War I. The first is militarism. Right? There's all the European nations of the world were competing against one another, trying to build up their military. And so there's a lot of arms being created. There's an arms race of guns, new military technologies. Everybody's trying to build their military up to compete. There's also a major alliance system. We have two forms of alliances, the Triple Entente, which becomes the Allies, and these are France, Britain, and Russia, and the Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Neither side really necessarily knew the full extent of the allies between the two countries, and so that's going to kick into effect here in a little bit. Imperialism, right? This was Germany, France, Britain, Italy, Belgium, all competing for colonies in Africa. So again, they're building their militaries up to compete against one another. And then lastly, there's nationalism. This is an extreme devotion to one's country. Ethnic and racial groups really wanted their own independence. Specifically with World War I, the issue deals around the ethnic group of the Slavs. And more specifically, the Slavs are the Serbs. The Serbs were divided between Serbia and Austria-Hungary and Russia. And that's going to cause a lot of tension that Serbs are not unified under one country. Now, the spark that got it all going was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. He was the heir to the Austria-Hungarian throne, and he made a visit to Sarajevo, which is in Bosnia, which is a large Slavic population, and a member who is kind of sponsored by the Serbian government kills Archduke Franz Ferdinand. And so Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia, but the problem is Serbia was allied with Russia. So then Russia gets in the war. And then since Russia gets in the war, Germany gets in the war. And since Germany gets in the war, then France gets in the war. And we have World War I, all because of this alliance system that takes place. We're going to skip the war begins. America's role. Okay, at the very beginning of the war, America declares neutrality. We do not pick a side, although we have deep economic ties with the Allies. So why does America eventually join the war? Couple reasons. The first are the attacks from the submarines, the German U-boats. A U-boat's a name for a submarine. And the Germans were sinking any ship that entered British territory because they were trying to beat British. They were fighting Britain. And because of this, they eventually start sinking passenger ships as well. In 1915, they sank the Lusitania, and they continued destroying ships despite multiple warnings from the U.S. that we were going to get in the war if they did. But the final, we absolutely can't deal with this anymore, was the Zimmerman Note. Now, what the Zimmerman Note was a telegram from Germany to Mexico that said if the United States entered the war, Germany was telling Mexico, you need to start a war and try to invade the United States to keep them occupied, and Germany will support their war financially. While this note's intercepted by the British, obviously is a very threatening letter from Germany. They're plotting against us, and so eventually in 1917 we decide to invade. I'm going to skip down a little bit. Please understand with some of these pictures that the style of fighting was trench warfare, and that there were new technologies like machine guns, airplanes, rudimentary tanks. There was also gas attacks that soldiers were issued gas masks. So new technological war for sure. Skipping down. So the war at home. Basically at home, what you need to know on the home front is that the war, people on the home front work to try and help out the soldiers on the actual front. And so the soldiers, or people at home, start cutting back on things in order to help provide more supplies for the Allies over in Europe. To do this, to pay for the war, the U.S. government begins a propaganda campaign trying to convince people to help out the war effort and pay for the war. Now, the biggest effect the war had on the home front was the role of women during the war. Women moved into jobs that had been previously held by men. These would be like factory jobs. Men go off to fight in the war, the women come in and take the jobs. This will ultimately lead to the 19th Amendment, which is the women's suffrage amendment, that women have the right to vote. Because I put that in quotes, women had proved themselves. Obviously, women should not need proving to have the right to vote, but in many people's eyes, okay, women did the jobs that men do, and they did them fine. Okay, they probably need to have the right to vote. For African Americans, during World War I, there was an event called the Great Migration. This was a large-scale movement of African Americans from the South to the North. This was done to escape the Jim Crow South, as well as, again, like women, trying to fill factory jobs that were available. Now, with the war, many people begin, and the government begins cutting back on people's civil liberties. And they do this by passing a law called the Espionage and Sedition Acts. This said that you could be sent to jail for interfering with war or saying anything that is disloyal or abusive about the government. So it starts taking away people's freedom of speech because they were worried that people were hurting the war effort, that this was going to be somehow, these people were spies, or they were trying to sabotage the country by working against the country. So people would start getting scared. Okay, they start getting scared with World War I. That this is something that is a war of such great size no one's been a part of before, and so people start cutting back on the freedoms and liberties that we have in our country. Now, lastly, at the end of the war, Woodrow Wilson, America's president, sets forth the 14 points, which are his points for how to prevent another war like this from happening. And the big one that you need to know is number 14, all right, called for a League of Nations. Wilson believed that we should have a group of nations all together where issues can get solved diplomatically instead of being solved with warfare. The problem with that was that it was included in the Treaty of Versailles, and the Treaty of Versailles is a really bad treaty. It puts all the blame of the war on Germany. Germany has to pay all of the war reparations, so all the debt from the war. They also get put with the war guilt clause that blames them for starting the war. So Woodrow Wilson eventually accepts this treaty due to the League of Nations being created, but he does not like the way that it treats Germany. So he brings this treaty back to the United States to get approved by the Senate, and the Senate has to ratify the treaty. But the Senate was worried that the League of Nations took away United States independence, that we would get dragged into another war again, and so they decide to refuse to ratify the treaty. This is done because America is moving to be isolationist, meaning that we're going to quit worrying about other people and other affairs of other countries, so we don't feel like joining this League of Nations where we're going to get caught up in other nations' problems, okay? So that's obviously the really, really quick version of stuff you need to know for World War I. Please email me if you have any questions. I'd be glad to help. Thanks. Have a good night, guys.